Welcome. My name is Anders Elbach, and I am an analyst and content marketing specialist at Gluu. Today, we are joined by Michael Schank, and he will introduce himself in just a second. I'll just have a few practical details to talk about first. The session will be recorded, and also if you have any comments or questions or anything as we go along, please use the chat function and we will address your comments. If you're watching on our live stream on LinkedIn, then you're welcome to write in the comment box there as well, and I'll try to keep an eye on those as well. Good morning, as I already said, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We're lucky to have a good show up both from the US and from Europe today, so very happy about that. I also saw that there were quite a few names on the list that I didn't really recognize, so I'll just give a 30-second introduction to Gluu, and then a short introduction. Then Michael will have his presentation, and then we'll have a dialogue or discussion about the relevant topics afterwards. Gluu, of course, is a business process management platform, and what we try to do to stand out from the crowd is focus on the people. We say that we are a people-friendly or people-centric solution, and what we mean with that is, first of all, that it's easy to use. It should be easy for the users, but also that we try to engage all of the users. So not just the process specialists and the process owners, but really all the owners, everyone who's involved in the process, we try to reach and embrace in the solution. And the reason we're having Michael here today, and of course, obviously, also because he agreed to join us, which we're very happy about, is that we're currently looking at doing an initiative around what we call process success. So we look really beyond the tools, look at the business impact, how to actually use the tools to embed it into the business and have some real business impact. And Michael's narrative around process inventories really fit this extremely well. So with that, I will hand over to Michael for his presentation, introducing himself and the topics.
Thanks, Anders, and thanks for everyone joining. It's my pleasure and to be talking with you today. So one thing I want you to get out of this is that the concept of process can drive enterprise performance across virtually everything that an enterprise needs to do. So a couple things you need for that is, one is obviously a great tool like Gluu, but you also need to have the right framework, implement the right methodologies, and be aligned with your people in how you do this. So I'm going to show you kind of the concept, but I'm also going to show you an illustration of this just to make it real and really show you how AI can enable great performance. So a little bit deeper about me. So I grew up in the consulting industry. I've spent about 25 years as a consultant at Accenture for 13, and where I was very technology focused. I started as a Java C++ programmer. I was a solution architect. I led large system integration programs. A couple of years at Bank of America in a technology role. One thing that I in my technology experience that I could say with certainty is I did not know what the business did. My focus and goal was getting code implemented, making sure it was defect free. I hit it on time, all the things that a technical person would need to know, but I had no clue what the business did. So then I moved on to EY, and at that point, EY did not have a very mature technology practice. So I moved into more business type stuff. And one of the first projects I did, I was working for a very large US bank, and they said they wanted a business capability model. So we interviewed some people in the business and created this model for their retail bank. To me, it was an epiphany moment because coming from technology and having no clue what the business did, at least I could see on one page, and it went a couple levels deep, what the business did. So I decided to dedicate myself to that topic. And then I started a process excellence practice at EY where we could serve clients from that perspective. I probably served over 100 clients in all my years. And And it was a variety of things, from defining strategy, setting up and running transformation programs, designing IT architectures, doing risk and compliance programs, you name it, change management projects. And what I valued from that experience is, while people may say, consultants are full of it, which is probably true in a lot of cases, but if you get exposed to that many different types of scenarios, you start to see patterns of why things fail. And that's where I came up with this concept called process inventory, which I'll explain in great detail, but it's really just simple. It's inventorying every single process you do, and I'll explain why that's important. So I developed the framework and then started implementing it in a wide range of projects, and it worked in every turn. I went to Citi and I was head of process excellence for the U.S. retail bank, and their context there was they had a very large consent order with a $400 million fine, so they started a control transformation program, and I really got to use this to demonstrate how process can be an answer to risk and compliance challenges. I left and I created my book. I felt like I needed to get that knowledge out there. Digital Transformation and Success. I'm not here to sell a book, but if you like what I talk about, then the book is available on Amazon. And now I have my own consulting company where I advise companies on how to do this at scale. So I want to. These next two slides are really about framing. So I want to frame process as an enabler for transformation, and this is a stat you've probably all seen. It was a McKinsey stat. It's somewhat all over the place, but 70% of transformations fail, and a transformation is a fundamental change of how an organization operates and delivers value to their customers. But the implications of risk is lost investment. So a lot of them go over budget, frustrated stakeholders, unsatisfied customers, and in today's day and age, customers can vote with their feet. They have power, and if you're not giving them the experience they're looking for, then they'll leave you. And then lost ground to competitors. But then, not everything is big, large transformation programs that's multi-year, multi-project, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. In our everyday world, we're trying to gain operational excellence, which is really just the ability to perform at fully aligned with your mission and vision, at the best you can. And that can mean many different measures. And I wouldn't even say this is complete, but enhancing customer experience and driving business growth, getting scalable and agile. And I kind of straddled the line between growth there and efficiency. And then there's a whole bunch of efficiency measures. So in our everyday work, we need to look for ways to be more efficient, drive higher quality, et cetera. And process is the key to that. So the root cause of that 70% stat and the struggles, really, in my view, is really the complexity of our organizations and frankly the chaos. The our organizations don't necessarily grow intentionally; they just evolve over time and grow as business needs and different requirements are placed on the organization. But that leaves a lot of complexity of overlapping systems, overlapping teams, spaghetti diagrams of how technology works, etc. So it's really hard for anyone to understand everything and all the connections and implications. And our organizations are composed of diverse sets of teams that have unique perspectives and languages. So, and I love this famous tree swing cartoon as an illustration that just shows how people view things at the different lenses and the miscommunications and the failed collaboration. So customer explained it one way, the project leader understood it a different way, and you could see the different tree swings that are envisioned by these different groups. And really, what we need to do is get to a common language. And and I think the 30% that succeed or so, I think it's caused by leadership that has just superhuman capabilities, that has their sorry, has their has a really good insight into everything that's going on, but that's not replicatable across many organizations. So there's a need for a new way. So there's two parts of the need or the equation for success. The first is getting to systems thinking. And that's really understanding that our organization is made up of thousands or tens of thousands of parts, and understanding how those parts connect and the relationships among them and how they drive performance collectively is really important. And this diagram on the right is an illustration of how I see the world is the process, and this topic of process management isn't just about improving a single process or a set of processes, but it's a framework for understanding how everything connects together. So if I know my processes, then I can understand which processes have connections to customers, if there's a risk and compliance need, what data it uses, and I could go around the circle. So really process becomes the ground truth to getting to system thinking in a very real way. So if you do this the right way, you can unlock all organizational knowledge. You can provide that common language to facilitate alignment. You could ensure clear accountability for your people, break organizational silos by making things transparent and understanding more precisely how you work with teams, and really fundamentally transform the ways of working in a whole group of ways. The other is alignment. So in this graph, there's two alignments. So there's vertical alignment. So everyone from top leadership in the C-suite, all the way down to individual contributors, are aligned with what the strategy is, what the vision and mission of the organization is, and that they're in what they do in a day-to-day basis is fully aligned to that. And then there's horizontal alignment where, and this goes back to the tree swing diagram, where there's all these different teams that have different focuses and perspectives, but they all collaborate effectively and coordinate in driving that. So, and it's more than just people; it's also knowledge, and there's a whole bunch of things that go into alignment. And alignment has been, and you could go back to Harvard Business Review articles about alignment. And to me, it's very intangible. Like you got to communicate better, you got to set goals, all this stuff, which is great and you need to do it. But I'm talking like, how do you get there tangibly? And you need a common language. And that's what process inventory is. So process inventory, very simply, is just inventorying every process that you have in your organization. It's comprehensive, and I want to stress the comprehensive nature of it because every single process that you perform contributes to performance of your organization. If it doesn't, then you should frankly stop doing it now. But you need to understand kind of everything, and be able to measure it and understand if you should do it, or how you could do it better. It's organizationally constructed. So in my approach, you start at the top of an organization. That could be an enterprise, that could be a business unit, whatever you define as your scope. But you just ask the leader, describe your organization, and they'll say, I do A, B, and C. And then you go down to the leaders that run those parts of the organization, and you keep walking that tree down, and you're asking people a simple question: what is it that you do? And you you turn those into, ultimately, when you get down to the process level, verb, noun, names that represent the process. But and then I go back up the tree and ask everyone for a formal attestation, because if you're going to use it for all the use cases that I'm going to describe later, then everyone's got to trust that this is an accurate representation of my business. And then ownership, you could see, there's not just an owner for a process and I define ownership as not just changing and improving the process, but day-to-day performance of how that process is being executed. But you don't just own your process. Your boss has some level of ownership, and their leader has some level of ownership. So you're really creating a hierarchy of ownership, and it's a semantic structure for data alignment. And I'll show why that's powerful. The other thing I want to stress here too is in the concept of process management, there's a lot of different modeling concepts. There's value streams and customer journeys for end-to-end views. There's business capability models that shows what the organization has the ability to do. I'm introducing process inventory, which is define every process there is, and there's process models. And I've seen in my experiences where you have one team doing process over here, and another organization doing value streams, another one doing customer journeys, but they don't connect together. And the key is to define a meta model that shows how they connect together so that every single stakeholder gets what they're looking for. it's all grounded in the same version of truth for what your organization does and how they do it. And then obviously you could attach it to strategy so that you could measure the strategic value of everything that you're doing. So, sorry, real quick. So you've created all this documentation about process. Now the natural question is, so how do I get value out of it? Well, I created this, and there's 6 ways, and I think this largely covers a majority of what an organization can do. But strategy to impact. If I know my processes, one of the first steps in defining a strategy is doing an analysis of the environment, both externally and internally. And if you could have an understanding of your process areas, then you could do some measurements on using a SWOT analysis, what's strong and weak, and then internally, and then externally, what's opportunities and threats. And that enables you to get to your change budget in an objective way so that you're allocating funds to the things that are most important to you. The next 2 are the change process and transformation management. So if you think about process as your common language, now when I have that idea that comes out of my strategy, I could fully align it to what the process areas are going to impact it. I could define better scope. I could align requirements to process. I could do testing aligned to process. I could do my organizational change management to process. So my procedures, my job aids, my training, everything is aligned to that common language. And I could manage my transformation. So define my strategy, develop my roadmap, manage my journey, all through what's the status of processes. Operational excellence. So having an understanding of your operating environment gives you that way to identify waste and inefficiencies where there's overlapping systems or people, where there's quality issues. You could drive a lot of things from this perspective, but really, in the owner combined with ownership, get people accountable for driving a better way of doing things. Risk management. So if you if you look at, say, the ISO 31000 definition of risk, it's the uncertainty of achieving objectives. Well, how do you achieve objectives? By doing things, by process. So if you understand your processes, then you can understand where your operational risks are, where your regulatory and compliance risks are, where your resiliency, business continuity risks are, et cetera, et cetera. And it provides a common language to clean up risk data, to align every role that has a role within risk management, et cetera. And then the last one is enterprise architecture, or really IT architecture design. And coming from technology and not knowing what the business did, I could say with certainty that I think a lot of enterprise architects struggle because they just don't know what the business does, and they can't proactively engage with them in a conversation to understand their needs. And they get in this situation where there's this natural tension where the business says, "I need this now," and enterprise architects saying, "But I can't deliver it the way I in the right way based on that." And usually the business wins in that case. So that's where you get some shadow IT debt, et cetera. So I think this is a great enabler for enabling enterprise architects. Um, digitizing organizational knowledge. So there is a lot of data that describes the resources and information about how our organizations run. And if you could take that data and either migrate it or link it to a tool like Glue, you could create libraries. And when you set up your process inventory or process taxonomy, and you define your processes and even do process modeling, you could do associations. And essentially what you're creating is a single source now of all operating intelligence or process intelligence, that you could use for all those use cases that I mentioned. And then the one thing that I'm really psyched about now is this concept called digital twin of an organization. So digital twin is a virtual model of your organization, that you could feed to an AI engine. And essentially what you're doing is you're training that AI on every single aspect of your organization. And that's the basis for that. And I think to be successful, you need to be complete. So that's why you need process inventory. You feed it operational data. Obviously, there's always a human in the loop. So make sure that you're using people to give it input, give it direction, make sure that the output that you're asking for it is great. And then there's all these operating signals or data about the performance of your organization that you need to feed it. And then you could use it for aligning all the ways of working that I mentioned earlier. And I do have a prototype that I want to show you with this. So let me switch to a different document, and I'll be quick. I know. Um, uh, sorry. Okay. So I constructed a fictitious, call it bank, a line digital bank, and I gave it some information. I used AI to create some information about the structure, the assets, the performance, strategic priorities, etc. But this is process inventory in action. So again, all illustrative. All the names are fictitious. But let's say that you wanted to do this, and you went to the leader of your retail lending business, and let my Jane Doe. So I would start the conversation and say, Jane, what does your organization do? She says, well, we do loan originations, we could do loan processing and underwriting, we do loan closings and funding, et cetera, et cetera. Then I would go to Eleanor and say, what does loan originations do? And she says, we do customer inquiry and pre-qualifications. We do application intake, et cetera. And then I go down to Patricia until I can identify every single process that her organization does. Now, once I do that, I have a named person that who's responsible for the performance of how that is executed, and innovation and change. I give it a definition. I can align that process if I have a process taxonomy to what products that support. So now, if I need to make an update to a product, I know exactly what processes support it. If I want to understand the risk profile of a product, now I have that linkage because, and I'll show you, I align risks and controls to processes, et cetera. I can align all the technology systems that it's leveraged. So if I want to say replace a system, then I know exactly what processes are impacted. I represent the roles that are involved in it, and I'll show you why that's important. And then those of you that use APQC, I aligned every process with APQC, and that's and it's a different way to think about it. So I wouldn't start with APQC to build my process taxonomy, but I would build your process taxonomy based on what your organization does, but then leverage APQC as a process classification framework. So you could see like processes across different organizations, and that could get you to standardization or reducing redundancy in technology and people, et cetera. So I created summary tabs for roles. I defined KPIs for each process. You could see at a rolled up level 1, level 2, level 3. And then for those that do risk management, and this is really where AI becomes powerful, is I could feed that context and the list of processes to AI, and I could say, what are the regulators that govern those processes? And this is again assuming a U.S. bank, but you can make any assumptions. And then what are the regulatory obligations? So I know all the regulatory obligations for retail lending that aligns to this. And then I built a risk registry based on process. So I think one of the things and I've worked on a lot of risk programs, especially in large U.S. banks. And what I think their core issue is what is the process taxonomy that they use? And I've seen a lot of organizations use generic process taxonomy. So one taxonomy that covers a whole bunch of different businesses. But when I was at one large bank, what their mortgage organization did was much different than their retail bank, which was much different than credit card and wealth, et cetera. So when people are on the ground doing risk assessments, they look at the taxonomy, they're like, this isn't what we do. So they have to make a lot of interpretations on how they align the risks that they identify to that. But that creates really poor risk data that really people can't understand because it's layered with assumptions and interpretations. So if you could use now as a data structure for say, a GRC or risk registry, what are my actual processes aligned to that organization? Then now I could have clean data that aligns with ownership, et cetera. And I've used AI to say, okay, what is for this process, which is answer inquiries, the appropriate regulation is Equal Credit Opportunity Act. I define a risk statement. I captured the risk obligation and the control, and then I did risk scoring based on it. So inherent risk score is, if we did nothing, what is the risk score of it? And risk scoring is really a matrix of likelihood, 1 through 5, and impact, 1 through 5, and they just multiply those together. Residual risk score is, after we've applied controls, and target risk score is what you want to get to after all the controls are applied. And this is typically, risk scoring is done by a risk level, but if you do it this way, now I could do a combined risk score for the process area, for the business. And since I've linked it to products, I could do it for products. So that's all I have to show you for the spreadsheet. Now I want to show you the digital twin prototype that I built. And screen sharing. Okay. So I built this in Claude, and Claude is I've only found a couple AIs that allow you to do this, but you could build projects. And projects, you could give it some background information, and I put all that background around this, and I've created templates that I wanted to answer certain questions, et cetera. But I took that spreadsheet of that business, of that retail lending. I've captured everything that they do, all the data around their systems and resources, et cetera. And I created JSON files, and I uploaded it to Project Knowledge. Now I could ask it to create a bunch of things, and I'll start with, and this could take some time, but so I ask it, hold on. Sorry, navigating tabs. So for this bank, I'm in the strategy team. One of the first steps I want to do is conduct an internal analysis of strengths and weaknesses. Can you create a heat map based on level 3 of the taxonomy? And what this is doing is, and I fed it some, and I created some business performance data that's in the project files that, about business performance and the control environment, or the risk and compliance environment. So audit examples. I've created a whole bunch of data, and I can show this if you want. And this one may take a bit of time because it has to draft it, but you'll see it does this thing first. But ultimately, what it's going to give me is, based on all this process area, what is the performance of certain business aspects of it. And this is really a way to connect this, and I stress the alignment of what people are doing on the ground versus what leadership sees in a rolled up view, but everything is anchored to the same semantic structure of process. So I won't go through too many examples. And if you guys want to see an example of, just drop it in the comments of something that you do or your organization does and struggles with, and how this can create that. But ultimately, the digital twin is for generating information using Gen AI capabilities. It could do predictive analytics. So, and it's all depends on what data you feed it. But if you feed it good performance information, then now it could analyze where things are from a process level or business perspective level, and really help you identify, say, where you have to do automation, where you have to fix issues before they become problems. You could do, and imagine this is faster. Sorry for I probably should have picked an easier use case. It could do simulations. So if you want to know, hey, I want to acquire this other business, like what would that mean to my performance? Or I want to do this project, how long would that take? Really the sky's the limit for this. So you could see, now it's generated this performance heat map. So I know, based on all the areas of my business, how things are trending, what are the critical processes, what are the critical strengths. etc. So now let's say I want to do, can you create a SOP for verify military status is one of the processes in my inventory. And I'll use this as the last case, but you could just see that it could be a huge time saver in terms of creating documents. And not only that, now you could drive consistency because now you could look at all the all the procedures that you have in your organization and sorry, and drive consistency in how they're constructed and make sure that they're aligned to process inventory so that there's that full alignment again. Now imagine this was faster and you know and it's just constructing it. And this is the last one, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah. Sorry. Just while this is running, there may be a challenge with the chat. At least I couldn't write it in myself, which is a bit odd. But we have a question or a comment via LinkedIn about the whole process inventories and the whole framework that you described initially, saying that this is not just pure processes, but maybe also more about practices than just processes. And then it's a bit tricky question, I think. So I'll just read it as it is. If you would use the term process for these practices, what would be the meta process architecture? I don't know if you get that.
I'm a little bit disadvantaged because I don't know the definition of a practice. So
yeah, all right. Then I think we'll maybe answer that indirectly then. But that's actually another. And sorry to Claude for speaking while he's working, but
usually it doesn't take this long. I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, but I'd like to get back to that in just a second. But one thing I also thought about is because there's a lot of different terminologies. For example, whether it's a practice, is it a process, is it a workflow, and also for today's topic, is it inventories, is it repositories, is it an architecture, or is it a hierarchy? Do you see any differences from the inventories compared to some of the other topics, or are they just the same?
So I think you point out a really important, and that question really points to an important one. Is you need to create a meta model which defines all these concepts and how they integrate together. I don't know what a practice is. I could probably guess, but I've not used that terminology in my work ever. But you need to here's a standard operating procedure. So it finally created, so you could see roles and responsibilities, who has a role in the process, the description, the trigger events, upstream, downstream processes, and then all the steps in that process. And I've used this before. You could take this and create a process flow from it. And in a lot of cases use AI to do that. So I'll stop sharing and finish that question. So to your other part of the question, so there's process hierarchies, process taxonomies, process architecture. I kind of look at them as all the same kind of thing. What process inventory is a way to construct those. So you could create process architectures and taxonomies in different ways. But really, I'm an advocate for roll up your sleeves, do the hard work, and really understand everything that your business does, because it's the foundation for driving enterprise performance.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think just to reiterate a few things that you mentioned that we also fully agree on, really, is that it is having one of the advantages, really, also about this inventory, let's call it that today at least, is the business alignment, so that you have this end-to-end process and you align it with the business objectives. Because we also see some companies where the process continue to live and be evolved, but it becomes more and more disconnected with the business outcome, because you don't have this end-to-end view. And also I think one of the things here really is that having these, that you have this kind of pragmatic approach to it, that you really need to look at your own business. You may have a framework, a QPC, you mentioned that. It can be other things for other industries, but that you have a starting point, but that it is really is critical that you adapt it to your own specific business, also with quality criteria or ISO standards, if that's what you are looking to include as well. So really adapt that, I think, is really interesting. And then just one more thing I'd like to emphasize really is that I like this. Well, more and more people talk about it really, but the process first approach, and that the process is not just a means to control an individual workflow and optimize a customer engagement flow or whatever it might be, but really is something that makes the overall company much more agile, more resilient, because you understand the business. I can add a few links in the follow-up communication, but we have seen two of recent cases, Pepco from South Africa and Sport24 from Denmark, retail businesses that have used this process first approach for their business, the ERP implementation and transformation related to that. So really think that is really interesting. And sorry, I'll let you speak as well.
I think that's right. and what I'm showing in Claude, well, it's slow, and I apologize, it's not always that slow. But what I think it represents is the power of what AI can do, especially. And there's a report I saw, State of AI, that Deloitte put out, and they asked the question, what do you want AI to do? And a plurality of respondents said deeply embed AI capabilities into our processes and functions. Well, you can't do that unless you know what your processes are. And there's another concept is, AI, it's not just machine intelligence by itself, but you got to think of it as machine intelligence plus human intelligence for hybrid intelligence. So you need to do the hard work to understand what your organization does, and then use that as a data structure. But then it gives you all those benefits because now everything is aligned to what you actually do as a business.
Yeah. And I think also, and you mentioned that as well, but I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind is also that it gives you I think you actually used the same term as we do with a common language, so that you can actually talk about a process across business units, across responsibilities, because you have the same terminologies, you know what you talk about. Whereas other times it can be really difficult to just talk about a process from end to end if it isn't described, if you don't know how it connects. So really.
And end to end is important, because something like a value stream cuts across organizational constructs. So, so you lay out what are my stage one or level one stages, my level two stages, et cetera. But then if you can map your individual processes from each organization that does it, let's say I do a source to pay. So a lot of different organizations can generate need for RFPs and contracts and stuff like that. So if you have the inventory of processes, now I could look at each process and say, this fits that description, and align it. So when someone says we need to improve our source to pay, you could really be complete because you've grounded that the alignment to what is complete for each organization, and you could be very specific of what has to change to improve that end-to-end journey.
Yeah, I'm sorry for just trying to keep an eye out for there's some comments from LinkedIn. So it's not because I'm just posting a question. I don't want to say, and I just got a comment that your audio was gone, but I hear you clearly, so that's fine. No, okay. But I think just to get to slightly or a very pragmatic part of this as well, I think a lot of organizations, when they start thinking about processes, it's because they may have had a issue that an implementation or transformation didn't work. So they go back and look at the process, or they may get a new management team and they are process first minded already. But there really needs to be some kind of triggering event. Do you feel that there has to be that, or what that should be, or should you just? I'm sure with your role, you would just say get started now, but maybe kind of a bit more meat to the answer than just that.
So in terms of what would start you down this path of doing process
Yeah,
inventory,
yeah,
it really depends on the context of your organization. So I always advocate for you need to, if you're going to do this, you need to create a playbook. And one of the first things you need to do is create a process strategy. So understand the context of your organization. So what keeps leaders up at night? Is it risk and compliance? Is it inefficiency? Is it cost? Whatever it may be, you want to align the strategy of what you're doing from process to achieve that. And then you want to lay out, and there's a couple different aspects of it. You want to define the framework, and we talked about meta model. So, what models do you want to include? What's the connection between them? If you want to include something like a practice, you could define what that is and how it connects with process, et cetera. Define the use cases, and then most importantly, define roles and responsibilities among your team, because you're going to have a process capability or process center of excellence that creates these inventories, but more importantly, governs them. Because the organizations are always changing, so you'll need a way to go back into the business on a periodic basis to say what has changed and update the the process inventory and get all the all the data back in alignment. But then you'll need to think about the use cases. If it's a transformation program, then I want to focus on what are the parts of the business that are impacted, so that I could use this process inventory to say specifically what is the scope of my project in terms of the processes impacted. Because once I know that, I know who the process owner is. I know the technology that's associated with it. I probably could know the technology teams. I know the risk person that's associated with it. So now I go and I take this large concept that leadership says they want to transform it, be it digital transformation, a merger and post-merger integration, whatever it may be. And now I could be very precise, and I could, in using AI, I could even integrate estimating models and have it create my project plans, estimate the costs, give me the timeline, et cetera. So a new way to leverage this common language to be precise in how you drive change.
Yeah, I agree. But also, as we've been playing around, I guess most of you have with ChatGPT or whatever, you also know that some of the AI, openly available AIs, they are notoriously liars, right? If they don't know an answer, they will just make up something, and you have no clue where it comes from, or what part of their answer that's a lie. So I think that really stresses back really also to having these architecture, and having all the taxonomies, the compliance requirements, all that in an integrated platform, so that you can actually draw all of that, let the AI generate answers and fulfill the request based on that content, and not something that it just picks up somewhere. So I agree, it will be a very strong thing, and just a short product feature dropping. Can't call it name dropping, I guess, but that's also one of the big issues, or in our next releases, improved AIs for helping you build the processes and instructions and all that kind of things.
Yeah, I think it's important to humans in the loop for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, what AI can do and what I demonstrated, it could generate a vast amount of information, but humans still have to look at it and say, this is right, this is wrong. Let me change this. Let me change that. You have to give it assumptions. You have to give it good data. But I saw one presentation, and digital twin has been around for a long time. I think it's $170 billion market in terms of digital twin software. But it's mainly in manufacturing and physical components, because no one's really defined how to model an information-based organization. And I think process inventory is the way to do that. But there's stats around what it has done in the physical world, about 40% efficiency. And there's a lot of other stats out there. So while you still need humans to make sure that everything's correct and it's not hallucinating, you could still get a lot of efficiency gains by doing this.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, but of course, the humans also need some kind of tools, whether it's AI or other tools for that. Looking at the different comments on LinkedIn, there are questions or comments about compliance, specifically in the business or in the finance industry. And
Mhm.
there's also a question or a comment about business architecture, whether that is preferable to the process inventory. Um, so, and again, I think it is when is it a business architecture? When is it a process inventory? Um, so, do you have any comments on that? And then maybe also a few on
Yeah,
the
so
compliance part.
I think you could say what I'm doing is a business architecture because I'm architecting everything about the business. I'll tell you my one issue with business architecture as it has been defined by various groups like TOGAF and the Business Architecture Guild, et cetera, is they put the business capability as the center of the universe. My problem with that is, by definition, a business capability is organizationally agnostic. It is the ability for you to uh, the ability for your organization to do something. Now, the problem is, and I worked in large banks, is you could have multiple different lines of business that say can open an account. So if I have one business capability that says account management, I don't know where this thing is actually performed. And and that's important because each of those different instances uses different technology and has different people and has different rules and has different risk profile, et cetera, et cetera, and you need to trace it to the real world. So my approach is process first, identify the processes, and then you could align each process to the appropriate business capability. And that way, think about business capabilities and process inventory as the dictionary versus the thesaurus. So what process inventory does is it creates a dictionary of every single action or process that your organization performs, and the thesaurus gives you those like processes across disparate businesses so that I could look and say, why do all of my account management processes perform differently? Should they have the same control profile? Should they have the same logic? Should they even be on the same system? Should they even have a same team via a shared service? But you can't do that analysis until you understand where the real work happens, and then have the ability to look across organizations.
Yeah, and that actually touches upon one of the things that I also talk about is really when you align it with the business outcomes, you also need to measure the process on the business outcomes. So not just the
Mhm.
process or KPIs, so the how fast the process runs, how many error rates and stuff like that, but actually
Yep.
how does the process and the changes in the process, of course, is extremely important in that aspect. How does that
Yep.
impact the actual customer satisfaction or the actual revenue generation or whatever the more business oriented KPIs should be.
Exactly. And as you saw in my illustration, every single process has a defined KPI, a source, a measurement of how often it's collected. But then, you could do roll ups of how processes at say a level 4 contribute to level 2, contribute to level 1. And if you do something like a customer journey and identify which processes have a role in customer interactions, now I could look at that overall journey, but I could trace to the individual process that could be um, causing issues or complaints with the customer. And now I could use all this data to quickly dive into the root cause, and fix it in a much more aggressive fashion because I've given the analysis teams, think of like a Lean Six Sigma team, in the DMAIC process. For a lot of them that don't have a good document environment, there's a lengthy current state analysis phase. Now we skip all that and go right into root cause analysis and solution development.
Yeah. Another thing which kind of touch upon briefly with the importance of the roles and communicating to the roles and understanding who's responsible for what and so forth. Um, that is how do you keep this alive? Because people move around, they get new roles, and
Mhm.
also one process changes, another one stays the same. A new IT system is included. That and all of those things, of course, needs to be constantly updated in the process inventory, at least and the systems. So,
Mhm.
how do you keep it alive, or what should companies do to
So
keep it?
there's two ways. So if you have a process center of excellence, you should define a policy. Let's say 6 months or whatever how often you do it, but you want your team to re-engage with that business, put down the process inventory and say what has changed. And they could say, this person left, replace this name, we've added these processes, whatever it may be. But they need to come out of that session with a new attested to process inventory that you could update your repository in. The second aspect, which I think is more important, is integrate into every way that you operate your business, because then that will make everyone a stakeholder, making sure that this thing is accurate. So, for instance, if I was running a risk team, the first thing I would do before doing a risk assessment is say, is this process inventory still up to date? And you could engage with the business real time to make updates. That way, there's continuous oversight, because if you're anchoring all your activities to this one thing and everyone has a stake in it, then it will be refined pretty much on a continuous basis.
Yeah, and I think that really is it may also be one of the more challenging parts, but that is, in order to keep it alive, you need to engage people. They need to be involved, need to feel that they get a say in what the process is. And I think you talked about that as well, that they need to recognize the process as being a true representation of what's actually being done.
Yep.
So it shouldn't just be a theoretical process that no one uses anyhow. So really keeping this constant flow and talking about this continuous improvement culture, I think a lot of people talk about, but
Yep.
really that it is, again, that the process work really isn't just, you shouldn't just create the inventory, use it occasionally when you need it, but really that, or for a specific project, but really try to make sure that it lives, that everyone gets involved, and that you
Yep.
keep evolving the processes. I guess that's the ultimate outcome, at least.
That's right. And I would start with, and if you're thinking about an enterprise and you work for a large organization, this could be daunting. So I would start with start small with one organization that maybe has some pain points that could leverage the benefits of having this alignment of leveraging AI to create, analyze information, and then just prove it out there. And then you could grow into other parts of your business once, and now you have a story that you could tell leadership of why you need to expand this. But I think that's the best practice. Start small, get some wins on the board, and then look for expansion.
Yeah, and probably on some of the very clear, recognizable, repeatable processes, whether it's onboarding or customer service or whatever it might be, so that you can clearly, that they're easy to understand as well. I know that they can be complex enough in large companies, but yeah.
Yep.
We are already running towards the top of the hour. I guess we could continue, but in the interest of time, I think we should stop on time. But I think you have a lot of experience from financial industry, and your example was banking as well. How would you do this if you are from manufacturing, if you're from retail? I know that you can do the same way overall. We've seen examples of that, but would there be a different approach or any clear differences that you would see?
No, the approach is exactly the same.
Yeah.
You still need to have a complete and comprehensive list of processes. And the only way to do that is to anchor to your organizational hierarchy, because everything ultimately is accountable to the CEO. So everyone in the organization structure has some level of oversight of all your actions. So nothing changes. And I've done this work in other industries. I just happen to know banking fairly well, but this really is an industry agnostic framework.
Yeah. Yeah, just one thing. You mentioned that you need to align it with the organization hierarchy. I think it is still important that your processes and the process inventories are not restricted to a specific business unit or a specific part of the organization. You can't just look at one process and how it looks within a specific business unit. You really need to look at what comes before, if anything, or what happens afterwards in the if you want to call it the full value chain perspective almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of disagree, but you start
That's fine.
organization by organization to collect them all, but then you could take an end-to-end view of from your value stream, your customer journey, and connect all the dots. But ultimately, you need to be able to trace to where the work happens.
Yeah, I guess that kind of leads back to the importance of the taxonomy and the how we define things, because is it one process linked to another, or is it one full process? You can do it different. You can do both approaches, but ultimately you need to connect the two and have the understand the
Exactly.
end from the initial start to the end of it, whether it's
Exactly.
multiple
It's all
processes.
about connecting the dots, but you
Yeah,
have to have the dots first.
that's right. All right. I think unfortunately we will need to wrap things up. Thank you very much, all of you who joined. And you will get a follow-up email from us with a link to the recording so that you can rewatch it or share it with colleagues who you think might benefit from it. And also, I'll probably add a few additional links to some content. And if you, Michael, has anything you want to include in there as well, feel free to just reach out. And of course, I'll encourage you all to, if you haven't connected with Michael or me or Gluu in general, please do so. And for those of you here in Europe, have a nice evening when you get to it. And for those on the other side of the pond, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. It's been my pleasure. I hope you gain value out of this.
Thank you.